They pushed me out of that boardroom like yesterday's trash, stripped of everything except my bare hands and a heart burning with rage. Lack of vision, they said, their smirks cutting deeper than any blade. But as I stood in that hallway, humiliation dripping from every pore, I didn't know that this moment of absolute destruction would ignite the most ruthless revenge plan of my life. They thought they'd buried me. They had no idea they'd just planted the seed of their own downfall. My name is Madeline Cross, and until 48 hours ago, I was the senior strategy specialist at Gravistech, one of Denver's most prestigious tech corporations. At 32, I'd spent the last 6 years climbing their corporate ladder, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and pieces of my soul for a company I believed valued innovation and talent. How naive I was. The emergency board meeting came on a Tuesday morning. I remember the email notification: urgent, confidential, mandatory attendance. My stomach dropped, but I straightened my blazer and walked into that glass-walled conference room with my head high. The entire executive team sat around the mahogany table like vultures circling a carcass. CEO Richard Brennan didn't even look up from his phone when I entered. "Madeline," he finally acknowledged, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Please, have a seat." The next 15 minutes demolished everything I'd built. Richard leaned back in his Italian leather chair, fingers steepled as he delivered the verdict. "We've been reviewing the AI initiative proposals, and frankly, your contributions lack the visionary thinking Gravistech needs to remain competitive. You're brilliant at execution, don't get me wrong, but leadership requires more than spreadsheets and timelines. It requires imagination. Imagination." The word hung in the air like poison gas. 3 months earlier, I'd presented a comprehensive AI framework that could revolutionize customer prediction models. I'd spent weeks perfecting it, consulting with engineers, running feasibility studies. The board had nodded politely, then shelved it. Now, Logan Harlow, the newly appointed creative director, sat across from me with a smirk playing at his lips. The same Logan who'd asked to pick my brain about AI applications just last month. "We're restructuring the department," Richard continued, sliding a termination package across the table, effective immediately. The walk from the conference room to my desk felt like a funeral procession. Colleagues averted their eyes, some with pity, others with that peculiar relief of watching someone else's execution, grateful it wasn't them. Sarah from accounting touched my shoulder gently. Mark from development muttered something about corporate bullshit, but their words were white noise against the roaring in my ears. Security supervised as I packed 6 years into a cardboard box, the framed MIT diploma, the Innovation Award from 2021, the coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Employee," a Secret Santa gift that now felt prophetic. My hands shook as I disconnected my personal laptop, the one containing drafts of proposals I'd never submitted, ideas I'd kept close to my chest. Logan appeared at my cubicle just as I was leaving. "Hey, Madeline. Tough break. For what it's worth, your AI framework gave us some interesting starting points. We'll be sure to build on your foundation." The audacity burned through my shock. My framework, my months of research, my innovation that apparently lacked vision. I wanted to throw the box at his face, to scream that he was a thief in an Armani suit. Instead, I smiled the same frozen smile I'd perfected in countless meetings where my ideas were dismissed or credited to others. "Good luck with that, Logan," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "I'm sure you'll add all the vision it needs." The Denver skyline blurred through my tears as I sat in my car in the parking garage, box in the back seat, hands gripping the steering wheel. 6 years, 6 years of arriving first, leaving last, of believing that merit mattered. The termination package included 2 months severance and a non-disclosure agreement. They wanted to buy my silence for the price of a used car. But as I sat there, something shifted. The humiliation began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. They'd taken my job, my security, my naive faith in corporate fairness. But they'd also made a critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. They thought I was just another disposable cog in their machine, someone who'd slink away quietly into obscurity. I started the car, watching Gravistech's gleaming tower disappear in my rearview mirror. They'd fired Madeline Cross, the compliant employee. They had no idea they'd just created their fiercest competitor. The first week after Gravistech was a blur of rejection and humiliation. My savings account held exactly $8,430, enough for maybe 3 months if I moved out of my downtown loft. The rental market in Denver had exploded. The same money that got me 200 square feet now barely covered a studio in the suburbs. I packed my life into boxes again, this time downsizing from my comfortable life to a 600 square foot apartment in Aurora, where the walls were thin enough to hear my neighbors' Netflix choices. My mother called daily from Boston. "Maybe this is a sign to come home, sweetheart. Your father knows someone at Deloitte." The disappointment in her voice cut deeper than Richard's dismissal. She'd bragged about her daughter at Gravistech to her book club. Now she'd have to explain why I was unemployed and living like a college student again. The job search was brutal. Every interview ended the same way: enthusiasm until they called my references. Gravistech's HR would confirm my employment dates and nothing more, but their silence spoke volumes. The tech community in Denver was smaller than I'd realized. Word traveled: Madeline Cross, competent but uninspiring, lacks vision, not leadership material. By week 3, I'd applied to 47 positions, 7 interviews, 0 callbacks. I spent my nights in that cramped apartment, eating ramen and scrolling through LinkedIn, watching former colleagues announce promotions and new projects. Logan posted about Gravistech's exciting new AI initiative, complete with buzzwords I recognized from my own proposals. The comments section praised his innovative thinking. I threw my phone across the room, cracking the screen. Another expense I couldn't afford. Rock bottom came on a Thursday. The rejection email from a startup I'd considered beneath me 6 months ago arrived while I was in line at a food bank. My pride had finally lost to my empty refrigerator. As I stood there, holding a bag of generic cereal and canned beans, I saw my reflection in a window: hollow eyes, unwashed hair. Wearing the same Stanford hoodie I'd worn for 3 days. This wasn't me. This couldn't be me. That night, I pulled out my personal laptop and opened the folders I'd saved years of research. Ideas too ambitious for Gravistech's conservative board. Concepts I'd kept to myself because I knew they'd either be dismissed or stolen. The AI framework they'd rejected was just the tip. I had blueprints for machine learning algorithms that could predict market shifts with 94% accuracy, customer behavior models that made current systems look like cave paintings. I called Marcus Chen, my old roommate from MIT who now ran a venture capital firm in Boulder. "Mad. I heard about Gravistech. Their loss? Seriously. Marcus, I need you to hear me out, not as a friend, but as an investor." The pause was long. "I'm listening. I pitched for 3 straight hours, screen sharing my prototypes, walking him through projections I'd refined during my sleepless nights. The framework Gravistech had stolen was version 1.0. What I showed Marcus was version 5.0, evolved, sophisticated, revolutionary. Jesus, Madeline. Why didn't you ever? Because I was being a good employee, I said bitterly. Playing by their rules. Following their vision. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know Sarah Kim, right? And David Torres. I knew them. Sarah had left Google to pursue entrepreneurship. David had been fired from Amazon for being too disruptive. Like me, they were brilliant people who'd been discarded by corporations that feared real innovation. What if I could get you 3 in a room with some seed funding? My heart raced. How much? Enough to start, maybe $250K for 6 months. But Madeline, if you do this, you can't just compete with Gravistech. You need to bury them. I looked around my pathetic apartment, at the rejection emails in my inbox, at the crack in my phone screen from my moment of rage. Then I looked at my reflection in the laptop screen, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something besides defeat. I saw hunger. I saw determination. I saw the person Gravistech had tried to destroy, rising from the ashes they'd created. Set up the meeting, I said. And Marcus? The company name is Clarin Systems. Why? Clarin. I smiled, remembering the mythology course I'd taken as an undergrad. It's from clarion, a war trumpet, clear, piercing, impossible to ignore, the sound that announces battle. After the call, I opened a new document and began writing a business plan. Not the sanitized, committee-approved proposals I'd crafted at Gravistech. This was raw, ambitious, designed to disrupt everything Richard Brennan and Logan Harlow thought they knew about AI. They'd fired me for lacking vision. They were about to learn just how blind they'd been. The warehouse in Rhino District looked like a crime scene from the outside graffitied walls. Broken windows on the third floor. A loading dock that hadn't seen a truck in years. But the rent was $2,000 a month for 3,000 square feet. And beggars couldn't be choosers. Sarah Kim arrived first, her Tesla looking absurdly out of place against the urban decay. David Torres rolled up on a motorcycle, helmet under his arm, surveying our future headquarters with a mix of skepticism and excitement. "This is it?" Sarah asked, stepping over a puddle of questionable origin. "This is freedom," I corrected, unlocking the rusted door. Inside was marginally better. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, a few dead pigeons we'd need to clear out. But the bones were good high ceilings, decent electrical, and most importantly, no corporate logo watching over us. We spent the first week cleaning and building. David hauled in discarded desks from a startup that had gone under. Sarah negotiated with a contractor friend to fix the heating in exchange for future stock options. I maxed out my last credit card on refurbished computers and a commercial-grade internet connection. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and expensive dreams. Marcus's funding came through on week 2, $250,000 raise. That felt like both a fortune and nothing at all. Sarah would handle the technical architecture, David would lead development, and I would manage strategy and business development. 3 outcasts with 70-hour weeks ahead of us and everything to prove. The first month nearly broke us. Sarah's code hit a wall. The AI model kept producing false positives at an unacceptable rate. David discovered our server requirements would eat through our budget in 3 months. I pitched to 7 potential clients and got 7 variations of interesting, but call us when you have a proven product. Night after night, we gathered around a whiteboard covered in equations and frustrations. Sarah would pace, muttering in Korean when the stress peaked. David would disappear to the roof to smoke and think. I'd stare at our bank balance, calculating how many weeks until we'd have to admit failure. "We're approaching this wrong," Sarah announced at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Pizza boxes stacked around us like cardboard tombstones. "We're trying to build what Gravistech would build, just better. We need to build what they can't even imagine." She was right. We were still thinking like employees, not revolutionaries. David pulled up Gravistech's latest investor presentation, Logan's Vision AI prominently featured. "Look at this shit. It's just predictive analytics with a fancy interface. They're selling yesterday's technology with tomorrow's marketing." "So we build tomorrow's technology with honest marketing," I said. "No buzzwords, no inflated promises, just results." We pivoted hard. Instead of competing feature for feature, we focused on solving the one problem every current AI platform struggled with: adaptability. Our system wouldn't just predict, it would evolve, learning from its mistakes in real time without human intervention. Sarah cracked it at 4 a.m. on a Sunday, running on Red Bull and Spite. "Holy shit," David whispered, watching the test results. "This is it. This is the breakthrough." Our first successful demo happened in our warehouse, with a potential client sitting on a folding chair, looking deeply unimpressed by our surroundings. But when Sarah ran the system, when they saw it adapt to new data streams in real time, correcting its own errors, improving its accuracy with each iteration, their expression changed. "How soon can you implement this?" 4 weeks. I lied. It would take 6, but we'd figure it out. They signed that afternoon. $50,000 contract. Word spread through Denver's startup ecosystem. The 3 rejects in the warehouse were onto something. More clients came, tentatively at first, then with genuine interest. We hired 2 junior developers, kids fresh out of school who didn't care about our sparse accommodations because they could see what we were building. I kept a photo of Gravistech's tower on my desk, not out of nostalgia, but as motivation. Every all-nighter, every rejection, every small victory was fuel for the fire they'd lit. Sarah and David knew my history, knew this was personal, but they never questioned it. They had their own scores to settle with corporate America. 6 months in, we had 12 employees, 4 major clients, and recurring revenue of $200,000 per month. The warehouse still looked rough, but inside it hummed with purpose. We'd painted one wall with our logos, Clairon Systems, with a simple trumpet icon, our battle cry in visual form. Logan posted another update about Vision AI's market penetration. The comments praised Gravistech's innovation. I smiled, knowing what they didn't, that their innovation was a pale shadow of what we were building in this abandoned warehouse. They were playing checkers while we were inventing a new game entirely. "You know we're going to have to face them eventually," Sarah said one evening, both of us exhausted from debugging code. "I'm counting on it," I replied, looking at that photo of their tower. "But when we do, it won't be as the underdogs they dismissed. It'll be as the competition they never saw coming." The war trumpet was ready. Soon, everyone would hear its call. The first signs of Gravistech's panic came through the venture capital grapevine. Marcus called me on a rainy Thursday morning, his voice tight with concern. "Madeline, heads up. Gravistech's legal team has been making calls. They're asking about Clairon's funding sources, implying you violated your NDA by using proprietary knowledge." I laughed, bitter and sharp. Proprietary knowledge. They mean the ideas they rejected and then stole. "I'm just warning you. They're also pressuring investors. 3 firms have already backed out of meetings with you." The pattern became clear over the next weeks. Every potential investor we approached had received a call from Gravistech's legal department. The message was subtle, but effective investing in Clairon Systems might lead to costly litigation. We lost 4 promising leads in 10 days. Meanwhile, Vision AI was hemorrhaging problems. Tech blogs started reporting bugs the system would crash when processing datasets over a certain size. Its predictions were inconsistent. And worst of all, it couldn't adapt to new parameters without complete reprogramming. Screenshots of error messages flooded Twitter. Gravistech's stock dipped 7%. Logan appeared on a podcast, "Damage Controlling with Corporate Speak." Every revolutionary technology faces initial challenges. We're committed to continuous improvement. But I heard the strain in his voice. He was drowning in problems he didn't understand because he'd never understood the technology he'd stolen. Sarah found the job posting first. "Look at this," she said, turning her laptop toward me. Gravistech was desperately hiring AI specialists, offering signing bonuses that bordered on obscene. They were trying to buy their way out of incompetence. "They actually called me," David admitted during our morning meeting. "Offered to triple my salary. And I told them I don't work for thieves." But not everyone shared David's loyalty. Gravistech poached 2 of our junior developers with offers we couldn't match. They took our code with them. Despite the NDAs, I could have pursued legal action, but that would drain resources we didn't have. The real blow came when they went after our clients. Suddenly, companies using our system received offers for Vision AI at a loss leader price. Gravistech was literally paying companies to switch. We lost our 3rd largest client overnight. "They're trying to bleed us dry," Sarah said, exhaustion evident in her voice. We'd been firefighting for weeks, working 20-hour days to retain clients while advancing our technology. I stood at our warehouse window, watching the Denver skyline glitter in the darkness. Gravistech's tower stood tallest, a monument to corporate power. But I knew something they didn't. Desperation makes companies sloppy. "Let them come," I said. "Every move they make reveals how threatened they are." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of our poached developers, guilt-ridden and drunk, called David at midnight. "They're in trouble, man, real trouble. Vision AI is built on fucked architecture. Logan promised the board a fix in Q3, but the entire system needs rebuilding." They're trying to reverse engineer your adaptability algorithm, but they can't crack it. I recorded every call, every email where Gravistech tried to interfere with our business. Their legal threats, their client poaching, their desperate hiring spree. Evidence of a giant trying to crush a startup not through innovation, but through intimidation. But the sweetest discovery came from my old colleague, Janet, still at Gravistech. We met for coffee in Capitol Hill, her eyes darting nervously. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Then why are you?" She slid a flash drive across the table. "Because what they did to you was wrong. And what they're doing now is worse." The drive contained internal emails, Logan presenting my original AI framework to the board as his own innovation. Richard approving the strategy to eliminate competitive threats through legal pressure. And most damning, an admission that Vision AI's core technology was derived from my work, submitted months before my termination. Why? I asked Janet. Because some of us still believe in doing the right thing, and because watching them panic has been the best entertainment we've had in years. I spent that night analyzing everything, building a timeline that showed the theft, the cover-up, and the systematic attempt to destroy Claron systems. Gravistech thought they were the predator, but they'd just given me all the ammunition I needed. Sarah found me at dawn, still at my computer, surrounded by printed emails and legal documents. "You're planning something," she said, not a question. "They want a war," I replied, looking at Logan's latest press release about Vision AI's upcoming revolutionary update. But wars aren't won with size or money. They're won with timing and truth. And we're going to give them both, at the TechFront conference in San Francisco. Sarah smiled, understanding immediately. TechFront was the industry's biggest annual event. Gravistech had booked the main stage for their Vision AI 2.0 announcement. They thought it would be their triumph. They had no idea it would be their funeral. The transformation began with a simple philosophy: if you can't outspend them, outsmart them. While Gravistech threw money at their problems, we threw ourselves into perfecting what would become Aurora AI, our answer to everything Vision AI pretended to be. I started with the media, but not the tech press that Gravistech had in their pocket. Instead, I reached out to Jessica Reeves, an independent journalist who'd built her reputation on exposing corporate misconduct in Silicon Valley. We met at a dim sum restaurant in San Francisco's Chinatown, away from tech industry eyes. "You're saying Logan Harlow stole your work?" Jessica leaned forward, her recorder between us like a chess piece. "I'm saying I have proof," I replied, sliding her copies of the documentation. "But this isn't just about theft. It's about how big tech crushes innovation when it threatens them." Jessica's eyes lit up as she reviewed the emails. "This is... Jesus, Madeline. This is damning." "I'm not asking you to publish yet," I said. "I want something bigger. I want the truth to come out when it will matter most." She understood immediately. "TechFront, you're going to ambush them at their own celebration. Justice delayed doesn't have to be justice denied." While Jessica began her investigation, I focused on building our narrative. Every interview, every podcast appearance, I crafted carefully. I never mentioned Gravistech directly, but I talked about Claron's origin story, how 3 discarded engineers were building the future in a warehouse. Media loves an underdog story. And we gave them one. Sarah and David thought I was becoming obsessed with PR, but they didn't see the full picture yet. Every article about us was a paper cut to Gravistech's reputation. The narrative was shifting. They were the bloated incumbent. We were the hungry innovators. The real coup came when I convinced Mitchell Barnes, a legendary venture capitalist who'd backed 3 unicorn companies, to visit our warehouse. He arrived in a Lamborghini, looking amused by our humble setup. "So you're the team giving Richard Brennan nightmares," he said, accepting instant coffee in a chipped mug. "We're the team building what his company can't," I corrected. The demo lasted 2 hours. Sarah showed him Aurora AI's capabilities, not just adaptation, but prediction with 97% accuracy. Self-optimization that reduced processing time by 60%, and integration flexibility that made implementation seamless. David walked him through our architecture, clean and elegant where Vision AI's was bloated and patched. "And Gravis Tech is trying to bury you," Mitchell asked. "They're trying," I said, "but corpses don't stay buried when they're not actually dead." Mitchell invested $5 million that afternoon and became our champion in venture capital circles. Suddenly, the firms that had avoided us were calling back. The narrative shifted again, backing Clairon wasn't risky. It was prescient. We hired strategically, bringing in engineers who'd been overlooked by bigger companies. Our team grew to 30, each person hungry to prove something. The warehouse transformed from a desperate startup space to a war room. We installed better equipment, proper heating, and a kitchen that served more than instant ramen. But we kept the graffitied walls and concrete floors reminders of where we started. I studied Gravis Tech obsessively, tracking their every move. Logan appeared increasingly haggard in public appearances. Vision AI 2.0's release had been delayed twice. Their stock price continued its slow descent. Richard Brennan brought in consultants, fired middle managers, and reorganized departments, the thrashing of a dying giant. "You're enjoying this too much," Sarah warned one evening as I watched Logan's latest disaster of a presentation. "I'm enjoying it exactly the right amount," I replied. The invitation to TechFront came in September. Usually, startups our size got booth space in the startup alley, relegated to the margins. But Mitchell Barnes pulled strings, and suddenly Clairon Systems had a speaking slot right before Gravis Tech's main stage presentation. "Holy shit," David breathed when he saw the schedule. "We're going head-to-head with them." "No," I corrected, pulling up our presentation plans. "We're going to show the world what innovation actually looks like. Then they'll get to see what desperation looks like." I reached out to Jessica Reeves. "Are you ready?" My editor is holding the front page of our digital edition for that morning. The story will go live 1 hour before Gravis Tech's presentation. Everything was aligning. Our product was superior, our story was compelling, and our evidence was undeniable. Gravis Tech had spent months trying to bury us, but they'd only made us stronger. Every attack had taught us to be leaner, smarter, more ruthless. Sarah found me on the warehouse roof the night before we left for San Francisco, looking at the Denver skyline one last time as the underdog. "You know this changes everything," she said. "Win or lose, after TechFront, we'll never be the same." "Good," I replied, my eyes fixed on Gravis Tech's tower. "I'm tired of being the same. It's time to become what they feared we could be." The war trumpet was polished, ready to sound. The battlefield was chosen. All that remained was the execution. The Moscone Center in San Francisco buzzed with 10,000 conversations. But I only heard my own heartbeat as I stood backstage. Sarah was running final system checks on her laptop while David paced, rehearsing his portion of the demo. In exactly 2 hours, Gravis Tech would take the main stage. But first, they'd have to watch us. My phone vibrated. "Jessica Reeves. Article goes live in 55 minutes. My editor says it's the biggest tech scandal we've covered this year." I'd assembled the evidence meticulously. Janet's leaked emails were just the beginning. I'd found former Gravis Tech employees willing to go on record about the culture of theft and intimidation. Most damning was a recorded call where Logan, thinking he was speaking to a potential hire, admitted that Vision AI was inspired by some internal work that didn't have proper attribution. 30 minutes to showtime, the stage manager announced. I looked at my team, Sarah in her blazer that she'd bought specifically for this moment, David in the only suit he owned, our key engineers in matching Clairon t-shirts we'd printed last week. We looked like exactly what we were, a startup about to punch above its weight class. "Remember," I said, gathering them close, "we're not here to compete. We're here to demonstrate what real innovation looks like." The auditorium was packed. I spotted Richard Brennan in the third row, Logan beside him, both in expensive suits that couldn't hide their tension. They'd heard Clairon had a slot but probably assumed we'd embarrass ourselves on the big stage. Mitchell Barnes sat front row center, giving me a subtle nod. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Clairon Systems." The walk to center stage felt both endless and instant. The lights were blinding, but I found my voice, clear and strong. 18 months ago, I was told I lacked vision. I began, letting the words hang, that I couldn't see the future of AI, so I decided to build it instead. Sarah launched the demo. Aurora AI came alive on the massive screen, elegant, powerful, adaptive. We showed real-time learning, pattern recognition that evolved with each data point, integration that took minutes instead of weeks. David walked through client testimonials, showing actual ROI figures that made Vision AI's promises look like fantasy. But the masterstroke was the live demonstration. We had Aurora AI analyze TechFront's own data stream attendee patterns, social media sentiment, vendor interactions, and predict trends in real time with stunning accuracy. The audience gasped as our system identified emerging topics before they trended, suggested optimal networking connections, and even predicted which startups would generate the most buzz. This isn't the future of AI, I concluded, looking directly at Richard and Logan. This is the present, the future is what we'll build next, in a warehouse in Denver, with a team that believes innovation isn't about corporate politics or stolen ideas. It's about solving real problems with breakthrough technology. The applause was thunderous. As we left the stage, I saw Logan's face pale, jaw clenched. Richard was typing furiously on his phone. They had 45 minutes before their presentation, and Jessica's article would drop in 15. I positioned myself in the media area where I could watch the screens showing the tech news feeds. At exactly 11 a.m., the headline appeared, "Exclusive documents reveal Gravis Tech's Vision AI built on stolen employee innovation." The reaction was immediate. Phones buzzed throughout the convention center. Reporters who'd been heading to lunch turned toward the Gravis Tech booth. I watched Richard and Logan huddled with their PR team, voices raised but inaudible over the convention noise. A reporter from TechCrunch approached me. Madeline Cross. "Can you comment on the allegations that Gravis Tech stole your work?" "I think the evidence speaks for itself," I replied calmly. "But more importantly, I think our technology speaks for itself. We're focused on building the future, not litigating the past." More reporters gathered. The story was perfect David versus Goliath, innovation versus corporation, truth versus theft. Every question I answered carefully, staying professional, letting the facts damn Gravis Tech while I took the high road. "Their presentation starts in 10 minutes, Sarah whispered, appearing at my elbow. We found seats near the back, watching as Richard and Logan took the stage to a notably subdued reception. The energy had shifted. Where there should have been anticipation, there was skepticism. Logan's usual smooth delivery was shaky. He stumbled over technical explanations, clearly rattled. When he attempted to demo Vision AI 2.0, the system crashed. Once. Twice. On the third attempt, it worked, but produced results that were embarrassingly inferior to what we'd just shown. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties," Logan said, sweat visible even from our distance. "But let me assure you, Vision AI represents the future of..." "Is it true you stole the technology from a former employee?" A voice called from the audience. The question opened floodgates. Reporters stood, phones recording, shouting questions about the article, about the evidence, about me. Richard tried to restore order, but the damage was done. Their triumph had become a public execution. I stood to leave, Sarah and David beside me. As we walked out, I caught Logan's eye. He was still on stage, microphone in hand, watching his world collapse. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The trap had been perfect, and they'd walked right into it. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours, Gravis Tech scandal was trending globally. Their stock price plummeted 18% by market close. Richard Brennan released a terse statement about investigating the allegations, but the damage was irreversible. Our booth at TechFront became the epicenter of the convention. Venture capitalists who'd ignored us for months suddenly wanted meetings. Enterprise clients approached with serious inquiries. Sarah and David handled demos while I fielded interview after interview, each one reinforcing our narrative. Clarion Systems wasn't just better technology, we were ethical innovation. Madeline Cross. A familiar voice made me turn. Janet stood there, wearing her Gravis Tech conference badge but looking relieved. I just wanted you to know I resigned this morning. About 40 others are planning to follow by end of week. The exodus had begun. That evening, Mitchell Barnes hosted a private reception for potential investors at his Pacific Heights mansion. The who's who of Silicon Valley venture capital mingled in rooms with panoramic views of the Golden Gate Bridge. But the real meeting happened in Mitchell's study, where 5 major firms committed to a Series A round of $50 million. You didn't just beat Gravis Tech, one investor said, raising his whiskey. You exposed everything wrong with corporate tech culture. That's a story worth backing. Back at our hotel, Sarah, David, and I sat on the floor of my room, eating takeout Chinese and watching the news coverage on my laptop. Every tech outlet led with the story. The side-by-side comparisons of our demo versus Gravis Tech's disaster were particularly brutal. Logan's been placed on administrative leave. David read from his phone. Holy shit, and Richard's called an emergency board meeting. My phone rang. Unknown number. But I recognized the Denver area code. Madeline. Richard Brennan's voice was different, no longer commanding, almost hollow. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. Richard, please, just hear me out. Gravis Tech wants to acquire Clarence Systems. We're prepared to offer. I laughed, cutting him off. You fired me for lacking vision. Remember, why would I sell my vision to you now? $200 million, he said desperately. Cash and stock options. You'd run our entire AI division. Richard, you still don't get it. This was never about money. It was about proving that real innovation doesn't come from boardrooms and politics. It comes from people you dismissed as unworthy. This will destroy us, he said quietly. No, I corrected. You destroyed yourselves the moment you chose theft over innovation, intimidation over competition. I just held up a mirror. I hung up and turned to my team. They offered to buy us. How much? Sarah asked. Doesn't matter. We're not for sale. The next morning brought more revelations. Jessica Reeves published a follow-up article with testimony from 12 former Gravis Tech employees, each with stories of stolen ideas and suppressed innovation. The SEC announced an investigation into potential securities fraud related to Vision AI's misleading marketing claims. Logan released his own statement, trying to shift blame to miscommunication and organizational failures, but it only made things worse. A leaked video showed him at a bar, drunk, admitting to a colleague that he'd maybe borrowed too heavily from Madeline's work. We flew back to Denver as heroes. Our warehouse had reporters waiting outside, wanting to capture the David and Goliath story's triumphant conclusion. But inside, we got back to work. Success hadn't changed our mission, if anything. It had intensified it. New resumes poured in, many from Gravis Tech employees. I recognized names, talented people who'd been stifled by corporate bureaucracy. We hired carefully, choosing those who understood our culture of innovation over intimidation. A week later, the news broke Logan Harlow had been terminated for cause, losing his golden parachute. Richard Brennan announced his retirement. To pursue other opportunities, Gravis Tech's board brought in crisis management consultants, but the company's reputation was shattered. 3 major clients publicly switched to Aurora AI, citing both superior technology and corporate ethics. Sarah found me on the warehouse roof one evening, Denver's skyline glowing in the sunset. Gravis Tech's tower still stood tall, but it no longer seemed imposing. You did it, she said. You got your revenge. No, I replied, watching the city lights flicker to life. Revenge would have been destroying them out of spite. This was justice. We didn't win because we fought dirty. We won because we built something better while they were busy trying to bury us. What now? Sarah asked. I smiled, thinking of the international clients reaching out, the partnership opportunities, the chance to reshape how AI technology developed globally. Now we build the future they said I couldn't envision. The war was over. But the real work, the work of true innovation, had just begun. The final board meeting at Gravistech happened on a gray October morning. I watched the live stream from our warehouse, now expanded to include the entire building, as shareholders voted no confidence in the entire executive team. The company that had once valued itself at $2.8 billion was being broken up and sold in pieces. Their AI division, the crown jewel built on stolen dreams, went to a competitor for a fraction of its projected worth. Logan Harlow became untouchable in Silicon Valley. The man who'd worn Armani suits and talked about vision now couldn't get a meeting with a startup, let alone a corporation. Someone sent me a photo of him at a career fair in Phoenix, resume in hand, standing in line with recent college graduates. I didn't feel satisfaction seeing it, just a cold acknowledgement that justice has its own way of balancing scales. Richard Brennan's fall was quieter, but deeper. The SEC investigation revealed years of inflated valuations and misleading investor communications. His personal assets were frozen pending litigation. The mansion in Cherry Hills, the ranch in Aspen, the legacy he'd built on others' innovations, all crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. Gravistech's tower still stood in downtown Denver, but with a new name above the entrance. The company that bought the building turned it into co-working spaces for startups. Ironic that a monument to corporate oppression became an incubator for innovation. 3 years have passed since that day in the boardroom when they told me I lacked vision. Clarence Systems now operates from a gleaming campus in Boulder, employing 400 people across 6 countries. Aurora AI powers everything from medical diagnostics to climate modeling. We went public last month at a $3.2 billion valuation, higher than Gravistech ever achieved. Sarah became one of the most respected CTOs in tech, regularly keynoting conferences where Logan once commanded stages. David launched an engineering bootcamp for underrepresented communities, creating the diverse talent pipeline that companies like Gravistech had ignored. Mitchell Barnes likes to joke that backing us was his best investment, not just financially, but ethically. I kept one memento from the old days, that termination letter, framed in my office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Below it hangs a photo from our warehouse days. All of us exhausted and exhilarated, building something from nothing but determination and code. Journalists often ask if I forgive Gravistech, if I've moved past the anger. The truth is, I'm grateful. Their cruelty gave me clarity. Their theft gave me purpose. Their attempts to destroy me only revealed what I was capable of becoming. Last week, I gave a commencement speech at MIT. In the audience, I spotted a familiar face, Janet, who'd risked everything to provide those crucial documents. She now runs her own consultancy, helping whistleblowers navigate corporate retaliation. We nodded to each other, 2 women who'd refused to be silenced. Success, I told those graduates, isn't about winning. It's about building something that matters, even when powerful people try to convince you that you don't matter, especially then. The speech ended with thunderous applause, but I was already thinking about our next project, quantum computing applications that would make Aurora AI look primitive. The future we're building doesn't have room for the Logan Harlows and Richard Brennans of the world. It belongs to the builders, the innovators, the ones who were told they lacked vision but refused to close their eyes. As I walked off that stage, camera flashes erupting around me, I thought about that woman who'd sat crying in a parking garage 3 years ago, clutching a cardboard box of broken dreams. She thought it was the end. She had no idea it was the beginning. The sweetest revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. It's building something so undeniably brilliant that those who doubted you have no choice but to watch from the ruins of their own making. It's transforming humiliation into fuel, rejection into motivation, corporate cruelty into entrepreneurial fire. They fired Madeline Cross for lacking vision. What emerged from those ashes was something they never could have envisioned, not just a competitor, but their replacement. Not just revenge, but revolution. My phone buzzes with a text from Sarah. New contract from NASA. They want Aurora AI for the Mars mission. I smile, that same cold smile from the conference stage, but now it carries something more satisfaction, vindication, and the quiet thrill of knowing the best revenge is a life well lived and a legacy well built. The woman they tried to bury had become their greatest nightmare, successful, unstoppable, and completely beyond their reach. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and sweet vindication. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story of transformation and triumph resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace justice and standing up against corporate bullying. Your stories inspire me to keep creating content that speaks to our shared experiences.